Hi all, this is Inez Russell Gomez, and welcome back to another edition of Conversations Different, a podcast from the Santa Fe New Mexican featuring the interesting people and issues of New Mexico. This week, we are focusing on what promises to be the hottest issue on the November local elections ballot, the so-called mansion tax. City of Santa Fe voters have the opportunity to approve a transfer tax on the sale of property in excess of $1 million, with the proceeds from the tax going to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It would work like this. A house sells for $1.2 million. The excess over $1 million would be taxed at a rate of 3%, or in this case, a one-time $6,000 payment. The first $1 million isn't subject to the tax. Backers of the proposal say they can raise some $4.5 million a year, which would be used to do such things as build affordable housing, help people meet their rent payments, and otherwise make housing less out of reach for the average worker. Today, we'll hear from both an opponent and supporter of the proposal, starting with Drew Lamprich, current president of the Santa Fe Association of Realtors. Drew, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Inez. So nice to be here.
Thanks. So what is the association's position on this tax?
We are strong advocates for affordable housing and truly believe it's an essential part of our community. We don't think this is the right route to do it. There's so many other more efficacious ways that could be addressed to meet the demand that is really impacting our community. The proposed tax that suggested around $4.5 million, even up to $6 million, would ultimately from the city just replace the funding that they've been doing now. We haven't seen any plans for how they're going to add to what their existing funding source has been, and really looking to replace what the city's been putting into the plan already.
So you're talking about the $3 million that comes from the general fund, and they have not said for sure if they're going to keep it and this would be on top of it, or if this is going to be a replacement. So you want to know, will this be in addition to or instead of?
It's one of the many questions that we want to make sure we understand and make sure this money is being efficaciously used and meeting the needs. We are strong believers in property rights and the dream of home ownership. The majority of the affordable housing funds have been used for helping with rental assistance and not actually building homes. We believe this is a supply and demand issue, and that we need to, as a community, really come up with really large ways to address a huge problem. It's something that's we're not insulated in Santa Fe from, but it's something that's across the country been a gigantic problem, especially in our post-pandemic reality where housing prices have shot up exponentially, and it needs to come with a lot of plans and a lot of money to really solve the problem.
So one of the reasons you're against it as an association is just that you don't know what they're going to do with the money.
Yeah, and there's concerns about that there hasn't been any plans put forth. There's been no economic impact studies about how this will suppress the housing market itself that does bring a lot of economic value to our community. So as we're looking to generate funds, we want to make sure we're not having a negative impact on our economy, on our businesses, and on our homeowners.
I think everyone agrees that this is a problem. And I think everyone agrees that if you're going to have an affordable housing trust fund, you need to have money to put in it. So does your association have another place where the city could get a dependable stream of funding?
There's a lot of options out there, including our main suggestions around developing a bond that could actually really develop the amount of money needed to make a difference. From the proponents of the bill, it says that it's about $400,000 to build a house in Santa Fe, which is a pretty stark number for anyone that's trying to get in, and for developers looking at the realities. And so if all of the money from this new dedicated source was to go to build a house, we could maybe see a dozen a year. And again, the vast majority of where the funds have been used the last 3 years have been almost all towards rentals, very few to actually building homes. That is what we need. We need homes built to allow there to be availability for the workforce housing and to make it more affordable.
I guess the counter argument would be that once you have a dedicated stream, not something that depends on an allocation, you can then take that money, partner it with private development, maybe get state dollars and federal dollars, so every dollar you put in could be $2 or $3 more. So that $4.5 million might be $9 million or $10 million.
That's a great point, and I think part of the challenge is in the real estate industry, we know it does ebb and flow, so this is not going to be a consistent source, and that is one of the many concerns we brought forward, that we want something that is consistent to be built on. Another big, large concern is that there's a fiscal cloud over our city about unimproved audits and being behind on audits. So why have we not accessed some of the state funds that are out there, 10 times that amount that are available for us to be trying to access? And that's one of the many questions we have for our leaders is, why are our audits causing us to potentially not be able to access some more funds out there that really could make a difference?
We're almost caught up. Just one late one is the only one left. I mean, progress. Emily Oster, I guess, has really done a good job after taking over that office, despite the many problems of the past. So what you're saying is we need to build more homes. So what are your ideas to make that happen as an association?
One is something that we've really been advocates for is the city-owned land. And even as we look at in 2021, there was an ordinance passed where we should be dedicating funds from city sales of their land to the affordable housing program. And we have not seen that actually those funds have been accounted for. So again, we've already approved 2 different sources for funds that we haven't seen actually translate into the fund. And so if that's over 2 years old, why are those funds not there? And then what's the plan going forward? So to your point, we're almost caught up, but a lot of time has passed and a lot of missed opportunity has happened with us not being in a financial position to get real funds.
One of the critics that I've read, or one of the criticisms I've read, is that this is a divisive tax as well, and that people don't like it because they don't think it's fair. Do you think that's legitimate, or is that something you're worried about at all?
It really worries me. As a sociologist, and I studied metropolitan studies, it was all about the development of the city and how government programs and development impact the community, impact neighborhoods, impact a family, impact the individual. And anything divisive that says one group is responsible for fixing the problems of another group really creates disengagement. One thing I love about Santa Fe, and as we welcome people to our city, is we talk about we're one of the highest per capita nonprofits in the country. We have people from all over the world, let alone people that are generations deep, very involved in nonprofits in our community. And that's something that we're really proud and strong, and it makes us create really a dynamic environment. If we're starting to say, okay, this economic class is at fault, and they're the ones that have to fix this, then how are we welcoming people into our city and then wanting to engage them with everything else that they could be doing? I think the other big element that concerns me is that this truly is something that we're all responsible for. It's something that we're all need to get around and create a solution for. So saying one economic class is the solution doesn't resonate, and I think it creates divisive.
Okay. I think maybe the response to that might be that if I'm a waitress who can barely make rent with 3 roommates, I'm not responsible for the fact that someone just moved here from California and paid cash for a house and, priced, let's say, a local lawyer out of it. I mean, housing prices, I think, have gone up 55%. Is that the right figure I've read in the last 3 years? What do you do with that kind of increase?
Well, I think it's something that's across the board that's impacted everyone. And so, it's the $300,000 home that's become $600,000 or $450,000 of this.
Yeah, I'm rich now.
Yeah. But that's really part of our affordable supply is going to be in that range. If you're looking at a multi-million-dollar home and its increase in price, how is that displacing somebody from an affordable house? So it's looking at really, again, a supply and demand issue that's impacted the entire market. Let's focus on building more inventory in the market that needs it.
Okay, going back to your planning background, Santa Fe has, like many places in the country, we're not unique in this, a real dislike of anything built next to me, because once I got here and got my house, that empty lot needs to stay empty. How do you increase supply with so much contention and people being against whatever's being built?
One of the things we've been strong advocates with the association is the accessory dwelling units and allowing people to utilize those on their existing properties. One of the great benefits could be somebody that is experiencing increased costs of living, increased taxes, all the different things that we're all experiencing, that they can help subsidize and stay in their home and not have to move, not have to sell it, keep that institutional wealth and add to it by having an accessory dwelling unit that brings in rental income and allows somebody that needs to be close to their job but doesn't need a huge place, and they can even walk, bike, things as we look at not being a transportation reliant city on cars. And so as we have a city that's the original casita, I mean, Santa Fe put it on the map for the original accessory dwelling unit. I think it's learning from that historical lessons that define our city allows us to create solutions for the modern world.
Yeah, that's a great point. I lived in a casita that was a former garage in my first incarnation in Santa Fe, and I can tell you when my dad walked in, he said, "Did they mean to make everything crooked in this place?" It was just lovely. What do you say, though, to people who say if 14 years ago when this was on the ballot before as it was and it failed, we would be in a much better place because we would have had the money building up? It was at that point a 1% tax on anything $750,000, I think, was the limit. What would you say that we needed that funding stream and that we would have been better off if we went that way?
Well, I think it's the same argument that we should have had more robust and efficacious funds then. Again, the excise tax was voted down by voters in 2009, and we think that so much can and should be done with other solutions than just recycling it now again. From my perspective, it's a political Band-Aid on a huge wound, and it's not going to make the difference for the person that's saying, what about me that I can't afford to live here? This fund primarily is, in its utilization, has helped primarily with renters. And that's great, and it's helped with some foreclosure in the pandemic. All of those things are great, but it doesn't actually solve the problem.
Right, you need a bigger supply. So what happens if it passes? This is a November election. More people are going to vote. It's not a special election. There's a huge get out the vote movement, and I know your group is probably going to have a pack saying don't vote for this, and then there's going to be the other group saying get out and vote for it. What do you guys plan to do if it passes?
Well, we are, docents and cultural, I think, as we welcome people to our community and explain the value of our community, the history of our community, we will be advocates for whatever the voters decide. It's important in our professionalism and what we do for our community. So I don't have concerns about the professionalism of our group and our ability to support.
I just wondered if you have the lawsuit written yet.
No, I do not.
Okay. So there's no decision yet on whether there'll be a lawsuit if it does pass?
No decision on that. And, some of the challenges with this is we were not invited to the dance. We got notified this pretty much as everyone else got notified. So we're still having to work together to catch up. Not being included in the conversation prior to the announcement.
Okay. So what you're saying is the Realtors group supports affordable housing, supports increasing the supply, would like a different source of funding, and would like a more robust conversation with you guys part of it, since you're the experts on property and sales and all those kinds of things.
Well, we need that partnership with the advocates for this bill as much as we need the real estate industry to reflect so we can come up with real solutions and come up with something that will make a difference for our community. And we all need to be part of the conversation. So even as we go forward and educate homeowners and the voter electorate on this issue, we want to make sure we're centering that we do believe that we need to come together as a community around affordable housing and do something that's really going to make a difference. And this is not it.
All right. Well, thank you, Drew. I appreciate your time. And next up, we'll be talking to Andrea Romero, a state representative who's heading an effort in support of the tax. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Inez. This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez. Great local content is only possible with a talented staff dedicated to bringing you the best local content possible. For that staff to do its work, we need your support by subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. If you're already a subscriber, thank you. And if not, there's never been a better time to subscribe. In addition to our home-delivered newspaper that comes with full digital access, we also provide digital-only subscriptions for SantaFeNewMexican.com. We'll also be releasing more online-only audio and video programming moving forward. The Santa Fe New Mexican has been here for nearly 175 years, and we want to continue being your source for local news and information. Visit us at santafenewmexican.com/subscribe or call us at 505-986-3010. Thank you.
It's a new day in New Mexico, and the doors to boundless opportunity are open as tens of thousands of New Mexicans reach higher to pursue a dream, broaden their horizons, and retrain for a better job. With the New Mexico Lottery and Opportunity Scholarships, you could build yourself a better future anywhere in the state. You put in the hard work, we'll help with the costs. For eligibility details, visit reachhighernm.com.
Welcome back to Conversations Different. We're speaking to District 46 State Representative Andrea Romero, who also is chairing the United for Affordable Housing effort here in Santa Fe. That's a coalition of community groups and individuals in favor of a tax to set up a permanent stream of funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Thanks, Andrea, for joining us.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Why should voters approve this tax?
So this tax gets to the root of a crisis that we've been experiencing in the city different, and that's really affordable housing access. And so when we look at what this tax is going to do, it's taxing folks who can afford to pay a tax like this. So it's considered very progressive in that houses over $1 million that are selling in our community will be taxed at a 3% excise tax, so over $1 million. So therefore, millionaires will be paying this tax, and it will go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And that fund, which is governed by a community-based body in our community, will decide how that is distributed. And of course, our goal is to build more affordable housing in our community. So that means generational families who are seeking to keep their families in New Mexico, those that are working that unfortunately currently can't afford to live in our community, who've been squeezed out, would be able to afford, and folks that, the working laborers in our community that are typically squeezed out. So really that's who we're hoping to benefit from this excise tax and why it should be voted yes on the ballot in November.
How did you get involved in leading up this effort?
Well, when amazing people are calling for credible things, you get involved. And of course, I've been working on housing for years now in the state legislature. For me, this is a really sensible way to tax and spend taxpayer dollars. So when we look at how it's regenerative and what it is that we're looking to create, I got involved both from passion and persistence in this sort of this area of pushing for the right policies to get into place, but certainly because it is something that has affected not only me, my family members, friends. It's very personal to, I think, everyday New Mexicans and certainly everyday Santa Feans who can't afford to live here. And so, deeply personal, also passion. And, we've got to fight for the right things that we believe in, for sure.
Voters rejected a version of this tax almost 15 years ago. And one of the reasons in the letters I've read in the coverage of the issue back then is that people thought it's not fair just to tax one group of homeowners, even if they're rich, even if they can afford it, even if some of them are moving here and that's the reason prices are going up so much because of demand. It's just not fair. It kind of bothers their sense of equity. So what would you say to people who bring that up when you talk to them?
I appreciate the ideals of what we're trying to create and how we've designated this tax. I think we're in a different position in 2023 when we look at the disparities of wealth in our community, and certainly after the housing crisis of 2008, where we just really weren't building enough. And so now when we look at that disparity and who's coming into our communities who can afford this tax, again, we're not trying to tax at the bottom because we know folks are already struggling to be able to make ends meet. In which case, if you're able to afford a home over $1 million, we feel that's very progressive, very equitable among those who are joining, the housed that are able to pay that. tax. So, it could be an agree to disagree situation, but I do feel that in 2023 and where we are in that wealth gap and who can afford to do this, it is really the right thing to do.
Now, just to make it clear, because sometimes I'm bad at math, it's that portion of the house over $1 million.
Correct.
So you don't pay it on the whole thing.
That's right.
And who pays it? The buyer?
The buyer pays it.
Right.
Right.
So a generational family, let's say I live forever and when I sell my house, it's worth $1.2 million because, the Bella Cedros area is now, very valuable.
That's right.
The person buying the house would
Pays
pay
that.
on the point above it. So I wouldn't be losing the wealth that I had built.
That's correct.
Which, then will put me in the nursing home and pay for the rest of
And
my
that's
life.
so important to, I think, the values of what we were talking about, right? When we're talking about homes that are priced over $1 million, right? The midpoint right now is inaccessible to most at $650,000. So when we're looking at homes over $1 million, we're not talking about even the median value of a house in Santa Fe. We're talking about those that folks are actively pursuing because of not only the price point, but in large part, what they're trying to get out of it.
One of the other criticisms that I think that you guys in support of it have to answer is we have a city that can't do a financial audit on time. People don't know where their money is being spent, their tax dollars necessarily. So now you say we're going to have this tax fund and you're going to spend it. And it turns out we don't know, voters tell me this, they don't know where the taxes and how the affordable housing fund is being spent. So how do you make people realize that it's going to be spent wisely? And, some people are concerned that so much of it goes to rental assistance as opposed to actually building more units. So go into that.
Sure. So one thing that's great about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is that it's governed by an independent citizen review commission, and that's made up of community members. They're nominated by other community members, agencies, and peers. So they're selected by the city council to vote and then allocate funds to these different housing agencies in Santa Fe. So for instance, during the pandemic, when folks were really worried about making ends meet when their jobs were lost and they had to pay rent on April 1st or May 1st of 2020, the Housing Trust Fund was able to meet the demand of being able to make those ends meet because citizens knew what folks were facing in a crisis. So the fund itself is really important to be able to meet the demands of what the community needs. And fortunately, that independent review commission will allow for that to be directed toward the needs of Santa Fe. And so when we look at affordable housing, when we look at some of the other needs that may be coming up, we don't know what next, they're able to respond to that need. So the fund itself is set up in that critical way that makes it citizen guided.
And one thing that's important, I think, always to point out is that research is very clear. The best way to prevent homelessness is that people don't lose their homes.
100%. As much as we can keep people housed in any sort of crisis situation, actually saves taxpayer dollars all the way around. From those who have to seek out health care, from those that are able to stay in their jobs, in school because of where their homes are located. All of those things make sense as to why we would want a fund like this to contribute to that.
Do you have any sense of whether the city will continue to put the $3 million that they're now contributing to the fund from the general fund, plus I think they're projecting anywhere from $4.5 million to $6 million from this tax?
Yeah, so we're projecting about $6 million a year. Of course, any additional dollars continues to give to the housing need in Santa Fe. So it's much greater than $6 million a year. It's much greater than $9 million a year. So when we look at the continuum of what needs to basically continue to be invested in, we would hope that this would add to, of course, what is already being contributed to, but then what else can we do with this fund that the city can really invest in?
And I guess part of what has to happen is how you take the original kind of the seed money, the 4.56, whatever it's going to be, and then bring in state dollars, federal dollars, and
That's right.
private dollars.
Yeah, so the great part about that, and again, with the citizen sort of guidance for the fund, is how to leverage all of these other historic funding mechanisms. So the state has been putting historic dollars into affordable housing. Now we have federal funds on infrastructure coming into our state. So all of those pools of funding are now leveraged by this tax and this pool of funding within the Affordable Housing Fund.
Now, obviously, you guys want this to pass. There's a community push, lots of groups. So who's involved in trying to get this through the finish line?
So lots of community activists. We've had a ton of political endorsements recently on our website that helps folks get to know what we're fighting for is unitedforaffortablehousing.com. So folks that want to lend their voice, their time, their effort, it's really a community effort. And it's really built by those who have not only understood the struggles for housing in our city, but those that know some of the policy initiatives to really get across the finish line. And so if you look at the political leadership, some of the organizational leadership on the ground, they're all on our website, but we'll be knocking on doors before November. We'll be talking to folks about how this tax works and who it's really for. And so I would encourage everyone to go to unitedforaffortablehousing.com to get some of the frequently asked questions and certainly get involved.
The city obviously is just one part of the issue because we are in a county, and the county has always taken a somewhat more expansive idea of growth than the city. So how do you answer, our newspaper actually, not just critics? 15 years ago, one of the things we said was you've got to get the county involved to do this. And once again, the city's going it alone. How do we solve this problem without the county coming in to help?
Well, being that I work with our county and our city as a state representative, it takes all of us. So I think when it comes to going it alone, there are some great things that the city can do that are city specific, right? When we're talking about the needs and meeting the needs of everyday citizens. Right. But then when we think bigger picture, no question, we all should be working together to solve the bigger systemic issues that we have in housing.
Yeah, it's much easier to do infill in Santa Fe probably than in Santa Fe County.
It's always complicated, but nevertheless, I think the folks involved are really committed to finding the right solutions.
One final question, because we're almost out of time, is this is an environmental issue in some ways, because if 42% of the workforce housing, the people who work here live somewhere else, they're driving every day. They're not all taking the train. So what does it mean for our air quality and for the quality of, having kids in schools, all the things that happen when you have younger people living in town to have housing that they can afford and use?
Not only is it an environmental issue, it is a social issue, it's equity. In our opinion, and my personal opinion, I believe that having a safe and stable home that is affordable is the best social program we can create in New Mexico, and certainly for the city of Santa Fe, to keep folks in a place that they know that they can go back to sustainably. And again, it prevents folks from additional traffic on the street. It creates better neighborhoods. You know your neighbors. It's stable. So those situations are what we're trying to create and sustain in Santa Fe, and certainly for the state. So this is a great way to do all of that, to prevent some of the systemic issues that we've seen, right? When you have folks in a homelessness situation or unhoused, it creates a plethora of problems, from health issues to that at-risk situation where the more transient populations in our state, especially children, have way more problems that unfortunately we have to unpack later on. And so if we can prevent that right out the gate, that is precisely what this is seeking to do. And of course, saving the state money in the long run, but more than anything, creating a better society, I think, for everybody to live in.
Yeah. It's exciting when you think about, however you fund affordable housing, a city where all sorts of people can live and work together.
Absolutely. And I think diversity in our city is absolutely an asset, right? We're the city different. It's been a pleasure to live here the vast majority of my life, and I hope to continue all of that, in which case we've got to keep it diverse and welcome everyone to the table, and certainly welcome everyone to live here affordably.
Thank you. We have been talking to Drew Lamprich with the Santa Fe Association of Realtors, and Andrea Romero, who is heading the effort to bring affordable housing to Santa Fe. Thank you. This is another edition of Conversations Different.